The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Head coach Kevin Keatts has been fired.
You are Locked On Wolfpack, your daily podcast on the NC State Wolfpack, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Some news happened this morning, Kenton, and actually caught the two of us completely off guard. We were both at church. I'm sitting there in the church service, and my phone starts buzzing. It buzzed once, buzzed twice, buzzed three times. I'm like, okay, that doesn't usually happen this time of morning. Kept buzzing. I'm like, nope, something just happened. The pastor gets a little bit louder. I'm like, okay, no, something definitely just happened. I take a little peek, which I'm not supposed to be doing in a church service. Sorry. Peek. Kevin Keatts has been relieved of his duties. He dropped a graphic, which is kind of funny. I'll read that in just a second. But Kenton, give me your gut reaction. Kevin Keatts has been fired as head coach of the NC State Wolfpack.
Well, nobody can say Boo Corrigan isn't making decisive and bold moves anymore.
Yep.
Because this is a massive buyout to eat. Like this, let's not make any bones about that. This is not some ho-hum, like, oh yeah, you got to pay a little bit of money here and there. It happens. No. This is a massive buyout. But this was a move that we all felt like should happen or needed to. I don't know anybody that wasn't either in the camp of should or needed. The people who said should were like, if the money wasn't involved, you kind of should get rid of them. It would be a good thing. The people who said needed to were like, payout be damned. Get him away from this program. Well, everybody is now seeing what folks wanted or thought should have happened. So now it's the coaching search begins, and that's pretty much what I'm looking at here. Because honestly, I'm one of those people. The best day of your life is today, and the next best day is tomorrow. So what we can do today, start the coaching search. That's it. That's where I am with this thing at this point.
We've kind of talked about, some surrounding factors to a decision like this in these last couple weeks. Some of the comments that Coach Keatts has had in the post-game pressers basically alluding to the fact the NIL support was not there this year. And, if he had deeper pockets, he could get better players. And we talked about the impact of saying things like that when the season is going as poorly as it is. You can't really expect more people to jump on board and want to provide additional support if it wasn't there last year. And saying comments like that, it really starts to push people in the opposite direction. And I would love to know, we'll probably never get full clarity, but I would love to know the jump-off point for Boo Corrigan. I would love to know when it came over this timeline, because like we've said on here multiple times, we were told on good authority to not expect a coaching move this offseason. Just won the ACC title last year, just went to the Final Four. To fire a coach in just a year's time, it's a little bit crazy. But for NC State to buck up and do it now, they were certainly rubbed very wrong at some point in the last, I'd probably say like a month or maybe a couple weeks. Something has shown them the light, so to speak, that you cannot continue down the same road and expect different results. So although the decision, I guess, today was unexpected, I do think it is the correct decision. I do think if you want to revamp NC State, if you want to get them back on the track where they're consistently competing for ACC titles or consistently trying to get to the second weekend of March Madness or, further on down the road, Keatts was just not going to be the guy. And we know he did it last year, but when you look at the entirety of the body of work, it really looks like a fluke. It does. The team was 17-14 before going on that run. And, this year you move even further backwards in the wrong direction. I mean, honestly, we've talked about missing the ACC tournament. This is probably, all things considered, the worst season in school history. When you factor in everything, missing the ACC tournament, being in the bottom three of a new conference, which is 18 teams, coming off of what you did last year, it's embarrassing. And I'd have to imagine the shock factor of performing so poorly, it pushed Boo Corrigan over the edge. So, Kenton, like you said there, for all the people that have been critical of Boo Corrigan sitting on his hands and not putting out statements on social media, not being as loud about, all things NC State as Debbie Yao was, here you go. He's making the move now. And I think to capitalize on the timing of this, which is another key piece of this, it's a move in the right direction.
There were only 3 teams this year that did not win a single away game all year in the ACC. NC State, Boston College, and Miami. That's it.
And you just lost to Miami.
You lost to Miami on the road to end off this season. And there's another thing that I want to be very, very clear about here. When you talk about, you and Grayson said that there was no way that he'd get fired. Well, yes, no way, given that he had a subpar to bad season.
No one saw this coming.
This is a little bit unprecedented in terms of how far you fell in 1 year's time. And, you look at this situation and you say to yourself, well, hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of you're getting a new coach. But I look at this season and still say, what a waste, because I don't think that last year was a fluke necessarily. I think that it was an adjustment in game plan due to some injuries that had occurred and due to some other things that had happened. There was an adjustment in game plan, and the adjustment worked out in a massive way. And it's something that we just did not see this year. Our starting lineup for most of the tournament runs included Mo Diarra and DJ Burns. Before the tournament, that was not the case. Mo Diarra was not a full-time starter last year. When he got inserted into the lineup, we all know the legend of Ramadan Mo and him absolutely cleaning the boards and whatnot. But he was not a full-time starter throughout last year. And this year we come back and see, hey, there was no priority on getting a glass cleaning big. There was no priority put on, hey, this is something that needs to happen. I get it. We missed out on some big-time guards that, I was told we're right in play for, and we missed out, sure. But the bigs portion of it was something that I also wanted to see that we just didn't meaningfully come close to addressing. So, for me, I look at this situation and I say, and that's another thing I want to talk about really quickly. Everybody litigating about whether or not last season was luck or whether or not it was just great adjustment, whether or not it was the players playing out of their mind. Who gives a damn? Who gives a damn? If I end up marrying Megan Thee Stallion because I hit the Powerball and all of a sudden, like I'm well above the tax bracket that most of the men trying to date her in, or if she just thinks I'm that guy, guess what? Either way, Miss Megan Pete is not my old lady. That's just how that works out. I don't give a damn how it happened or why it happened. It did happen. And what we do know is off of that happening, we had one of the worst seasons in NC State basketball history. Own that, live with that, move on from there. But stop all this whole humming and back and forth and about what did it mean? And is it luck? Is it skill? Or who cares? It happened.
I do think that the decision to make this move now, it revolves a lot around having standards for the program. And that's been a conversation for, I guess, really the entirety of Keatts' tenure. You had the NCAA cloud over the program post-Gottfried in the first couple of years of Keatts. And getting out of that, people just wanted to see consistent success. People want to see NC State get to the tournament, pretty much each and every year. That should be the goal every single year, especially the storied history that this program did have that got kind of lost along the way in the early 2000s up until somewhat recently. State fans just want NC State to be competitive. We don't want to have to wait for the one-off or make a tournament once and have to sit for 3 years and, oh, great, we're back on the bubble. Are we ever going to do anything ever again? We can't live for the one-off. This program has to have standards. And I think firing Keatts directly after winning the ACC title and going to the Final Four, this is a statement of we have to have standards. You can't have the worst program or the worst season in program history after what you just accomplished. All the momentum that you should be having right now. Punt. The 67-yard punt downfield, and it was coffin cornered, a perfect punt. That's how brutal the situation is. Okay, to Keatts' credit, and I'll read some of his statement here, he's done a lot of talking about NIL. The NIL wasn't where it should be for the program. Now, that's not an excuse for the way the season panned out, but the NIL did not match where the standards should be for this program. And I've seen a couple people here in the comments, well, now's your time. If you want to talk about NIL, now is the time to get involved, because the new coach, whoever it may be, we'll talk about that also, is going to need more help than you could possibly imagine. $2 million has been the number floating around with what NC State had to work with this year. It ain't going to cut it. You will never compete outside of, a magical run with just $2 million, especially in the ACC. So, the NIL is a big portion of this, but for me, the overarching statement made by Boo Corrigan making this move right now is standards. NC State is making the conscious decision to be competitive, not just be competitive, but stay competitive. They see what Duke and Carolina have done down the street. They're not the Duke and Carolina. Well, maybe Duke is, but those two are not the powers, the superpowers that they used to be. This is a time that NC State needs to take advantage of that. Hubert Davis, I'll go ahead and take my shots now. Hubert Davis is kind of fumbling around over there in Chapel Hill. That's when NC State needs to strike. We've waited forever to try and strike back because freaking Roy Williams owned us. He owned us. Now Roy Williams is gone. Hubert Davis is fumbling around. That's when NC State needs to strike. You went to the Final Four last year. You won the ACC title. That's the momentum we've been craving for 40 plus years. It had to be now. It had to be now. And so I want to give a lot of credit to Boo Corrigan, because it's not an easy decision. But Keatts just won himself a ton of money in extensions and bonuses, and to wipe all that out in a calendar year, let's put in your cojones on the table. Boo Corrigan said, nope, we will have standards. I'm tired of sitting around waiting. Standards will be taken care of right now.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. There's always some underdogs to play. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, and more. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to find. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The Big 12 tournament tips off with Kansas State facing Arizona State. K-State favored by 5.5, according to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
JT Toppin is the Big 12 Player of the Year.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Big 12 Player of the Year, JT Toppin. Maybe not a shocking revelation, as we've kind of painted that picture on a previous episode, and whether or not there was an expectation he would be that guy, Chris, but incredible individual season, one of the all-time Red Raiders seasons, and a dude that was as advertised with a whole lot of hype, man, coming into this thing when he decided to become a Red Raider. And I think thus far he has lived up to that billing. Congratulations to JT.
Yeah, this went the way that we thought it would. I think that it's just the irony is that the biggest win you had in league play, he was sent to the showers early. But other than that, he just had a phenomenal year. I mean, when you saw that stat the other day when he's got the most 30 and 10 games in league plays, like he belongs in like the Michael Beasley, Blake Griffin, Kevin Durant. That's big time stuff.
Pretty good,
yeah. That's. Those are elite college players and would go on all to play in the NBA and whatnot. But it just, if you would have told me LJ Cryer was going to get it or had gotten it, I wouldn't have necessarily liked it or agreed with it, but I would have understood. But I think everybody, and again, for the same reasons that if you tell me Kelvin Sampson is the Big 12 Coach of the Year, which he is, I get it. I'd certainly understand. Now, when you're ready for gripes and things, I've got
easy, big fella. Simmer.
I've got
make them wait for something. Let's make
two specific ones that I wanna get into here.
We'll get to griping here in just a minute.
Yeah.
As far as JT's season, I mean, you've got as good of a seat for watching his progress and development through the year, and I'm just curious what you saw from earlier in the year to where you feel like he is now as a player. How did he fit with the team as the year went along, or how did the team maybe fit around JT? What's kind of the story, you think, of his 2024-2025 college basketball season in Lubbock so far?
What's interesting is that he missed some time in December. Obviously that A&M game we've talked about. You'd love to have had him back then. He had a monster night against UCF, ironically enough, on New Year's Eve, and that was about the only thing that went right for the Red Raiders. And then if you remember, so that's the beginning of this conference season. And again, he's the conference player of the year. So they're talking about like the league schedule and everything. But if you go back, he went for like 26 and 11 or something crazy against UCF. I can't remember the exact stat line, but it wasn't enough. And it was like he was really the only one doing anything positive. Everybody else just didn't play well, and you didn't play well as a team. But then you go to on that trip to Utah, and he gets 2 quick fouls in Salt Lake against Utah, and you're like, okay, well, dang it. Now, and do you remember? I don't know if you remember this, but like he didn't play the bulk of that first half, but Coach McCasland puts him in for like a little spurt, and like Tech went on like a 9 or 11-0 run, and he scored like 4 points there. Anyways, he had a modest stat line that night, and then against BYU, he was a kind of a non-factor. And I remember people going, "What's wrong with JT?" Because he's over there, kind of had the bad body language is what they viewed. Or remember these?
Oh yeah.
Okay, and that's the first 3 of the 20 games. This great stat line in a loss, and then he's kind of a non-factor in 2 wins. And so you're trying to compute all this, going, well, is he a key cog? Is he pissed? Is he just not any good? Are these hollow numbers or whatever? Okay, so I just offer that up to say that once he started figuring out and being consistent and playing and staying out of foul trouble, it created this deadly recipe of inside out that you pick your poison, opponent. You decide. You want to double the post? We're going to kill you out here. You want to let him go one-on-one down there? He's going to kill you down there. So you decide what you want. And teams ultimately kind of decided to drink different levels of poison from all over the place. It's like, we'll do a little this, we'll do a little that, we'll try to confuse them and mix them up, and that didn't work. And
it's still a little poison. It's not going to save you.
That's right. You're just prolonging the inevitable, is what you're doing.
You can't get a little pregnant. You can't be a little poisoned.
But he had to learn to play out of a double team. I think that kind of changed things. But the word years from now that we need to use to describe his game, it's just efficient. This is not somebody that misses a lot of shots. He's not a volume shooter that is got the benefit of 18 attempts a night, and okay, he makes 6, and so now he's averaging double figures. This wasn't somebody that, because of his hook shot, he wasn't living at the free throw line. Okay, this isn't a bruiser that's like, dunking on people and all that night in and night out. So he wasn't living at the free throw line with these scoring numbers. This was just legitimately somebody that has elite quickness and long arms and these hands, because he'll tell you, God gave me a gifted left arm and left hand, and I thank him every day for the superpowers that are in that bad boy. And if you noticed against Arizona State the other day, he's dropping those hooks off the glass and all that, and he's just kind of looking at it like, oh man, look at this thing. And like, it was, and he's the other thing too is like he's very under the radar. This is not an outspoken kid. He's 19 years old. He's 19. he's a true sophomore. So
we got to get this guy like a sequin glove or something. Let's get this thing dressed up.
that's what I'm saying. That's kind of how he's looking like.
Showmanship, man.
Yeah, that's right.
If it's not the sequins he wants, he can go with something more like Avengers or whatever that thing is. That guy's got whatever. Snap your fingers and the world goes boom. You're describing. You gave me a perfect answer. That's exactly what I wanted. You took us on this path from the beginning of Big 12 play that I, admittedly, had even kind of forgotten about. This little stretch and the questions we were getting, the text we were getting from Matador mobsters at 2 a.m. I'd have to say, honey, not now. I got to answer this about JT. They're wondering what's wrong with JT. That's really what it was. I'd sort of just slid that off into a distant, foggy memory. And we fast forward and boom, he's a conference player of the year.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. There's always some underdogs to play. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, and more. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to find. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. And with conference tournament season in full swing, you could turn that $5 into $200 in bonus bets tonight. The Big 12 tournament tips off with Kansas State facing Arizona State. K-State favored by 5.5, according to FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all tournament long.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So some names that seem to be climbing, that seem to be on the rise for this Indiana squad in terms of the new head coach who will be here in 2025 and 2026. And look, I know that Mike Woodson kind of scared some folks when he said, well, maybe I'm leaving a little too early. No, that's okay. No, you've made that decision. That's fine. So have we. Let's go ahead and part ways. Jeez. I think there are some names in the past that we have mentioned in passing that were not the big, splashy, sexy hire at the time. But I think that Indiana has really thought about and very well could become the next head coach. And the first one that I think is really, really, really good is Brad Brownell from down at Clemson, okay? Now, when you say the name and you see the face, most people don't jump out of their seats and start celebrating and high-fiving, right? They just don't, because this guy's been coaching for a long time. And he's been at a place at Clemson where, let's be real, they're overshadowed by their football program, as most ACC teams are. But this guy wins, and he's winning as of late. And that's the big thing that Indiana is really taking into consideration with Brad Brownell down at Clemson. He has coached for 23 years. He's won 62% of his games, which is pretty darn good considering he's been at UNC Wilmington, Wright State, and he's been at Clemson since 2010, okay? He's taken them to 4 NCAA tournaments. This year will be 5. Heck, he's got them as a top 10 team in college basketball right now. Like, not too bad. One of those was a run in the NCAA tournament, and now they're about to do it again. They're 26-5 to end the regular season. So they're pretty darn good. And what Indiana seems to like about him, as far as I know, is the fact that he has had success as of late. Look at his past. We'll say since 2020, since COVID, when things started to change in terms of NIL and transfer portal. It just started to kind of get mentioned, and then it picked up pretty heavily, right? Since 2020, he's made the tournament twice, and this will be his third time. Not too bad for a place like Clemson, who doesn't really compete in terms of NIL and transfer portal in basketball. He's made them very good. And that's what Indiana likes. And that's what you should like too, is the fact that he is making a place like Clemson successful in this new era. And the idea here is imagine what he could do at Bloomington. Imagine what he could do with the resources and the fan base and the facilities that Indiana can offer him here with the Hoosiers. It's unlimited, literally unlimited. And I think that's what makes him an attractive hire. Is he going to be just the breaking news headline, talk about it for the next 8 weeks across the country? No, probably not if that hire is made. We will talk about it as much as possible if this does come to fruition, but he's not the Bruce Pearl. He's not the Brad Stevens. He's not even the Scott Drew, right? But he's somebody that's been coaching for a long time. And the recent success is a big, big deal. I like him. I think he's a good coach. I don't know anything about him personally, but he seems to kind of have a good head on his shoulders. He seems to be liked in Clemson. And guess why? It's because he wins. And I think Indiana would be lucky to have a guy like him. So keep him in mind, because I really do think he's climbing the ranks. And if you're not a fan, I'm curious on why. If you're against Brownell, tell me why. Leave them in the YouTube comments. I'm genuinely curious on where you stand if he were to be the next head coach. I also want to know how you feel about a guy that we've mentioned kind of in passing here and there, but all of a sudden has become, I don't want to say the favorite, but has become somebody that's going to make the final interview, I think. And he's somebody that's been coaching not very long, but God, he's been good. He's the coach for an NCAA tournament team. They're currently a 10 seed right now in the NCAA tournament. And that man is Ben McCollum at Drake. Yes, at Drake. He has 1 year. Uno, right? He has 1 year of coaching as a head coach. And it's at Drake right now where they finished the regular season 30-3. Okay. They're really good. That's a really good Drake team. I think they're down there in the, I think they're down there in the Alabama region as the 2 seed. That's the 2 seed that they could match up with down there. They're really, really good. Okay. And it seems to be that Indiana's interested in a young up and comer who, if you land him, or let me say it this way, with somebody like this, it's a big, big risk to hire him. There's no doubt about it. He has legitimately coached as a head coach in college for one singular season. Okay. You have a lot of risk here, but the idea is you take a chance, and if it works out, he could be the coach of the future. He could be your next big Hall of Fame coach. He could be the next Coach K. He could be the next Roy Williams, whoever. That's the idea. I'm not saying he's going to be that. All right, let's not take this out of context here. I'm not saying that's who Ben McCollum is, because we don't know, but that's the idea. And I think that may appeal to some big name people at IU. I think that may appeal to some people who are in the decision-making room, who are at the decision-making desk. You take a chance on a guy who is young, who doesn't have a ton of experience, but in his limited time is very, very successful. And if you do that and it works, you look like a freaking genius, right? If it doesn't work, then it's like, what the heck were you doing? And that's what Indiana's got to decide. So I think that's why he will be a finalist for this job. I think Ben McCollum will absolutely be a finalist for this gig, but I don't know if he gets it, because Indiana's got to decide, is the reward worth the risk? What are the percentages of this actually working out? If you give him everything he needs, he's proven he can be successful even with limited stuff, right? At Drake. You take a step up to IU, that's big time stuff. But this is where we circle back to, can you handle the spotlight? Can you handle the quote fishbowl that they call it with being the Indiana basketball coach? Can you handle that? We don't know. You have no idea with this guy. None. And that's the risk that you would take. So I think those are the two big names right now that are climbing, surging up the leaderboard in terms of who will be considered for the Indiana head coaching job. Are there other names out there? Yeah, sure. But those are the two that I wanted to highlight, because I feel like they are ones that aren't the most, again, just the breaking news headline hire, but ones that could be really, really good. And that's what I'm looking at. In terms of what I talk about on this show, I'm looking at ones that I think are going to fit with Indiana. And I think both of these guys would. One's a bigger risk than the other, and one's been coaching for a long time. It could very well just kind of be, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. But I'm telling you, the Brownell from Clemson and McCollum from Drake are on the list